Have you ever witnessed something in nature so unexpected, so heartbreaking, that it changes the way you see the wild forever? In the shadow of the Rocky Mountains, under the fading light of the evening sun, two tiny wolf cubs stumbled out of the forest. Their paws trembled, their ribs showed beneath their fur, and their cries pierced the silence. They weren't looking for food. They weren't looking for shelter. They were begging a grizzly bear for help. What happened next would defy every instinct, every expectation. It would reveal a side of the wild that no camera had ever captured before. A story not of violence, but of compassion, resilience, and the kind of bond that could move the entire world to tears. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and turn on notifications. That way, you'll never miss more stories of courage, hope, and the unbelievable moments that remind us of the power of nature. The last light of evening slid down the spine of the Rockies and pooled in the valley like liquid gold. Wind moved across the lodgepole pines in long sighs, carrying the clean scent of snowmelt and damp earth. A female grizzly, scar on her shoulder. Winter, fat already thinning with spring's hunger, nose-tested the air along a braided stream. She had fished these shallows for 3 seasons, knew where the cutthroat hid beneath undercut banks, knew where elk crossed at dawn. Tonight the water was too fast and clear. She tasted only silt, cold, and the metal tang of distant thunder. Heard you. Ears pivoted. A sound threaded the wind, too thin to be a fox, too urgent to be birds. It came again. High, stuttering, not the full-throated cry of a wolf, but the smaller, trembling version of it. Pups. She stood, lifting her bulk onto hind legs to see above the willow scrub. The valley floor stretched pale in the last light. A pair of shapes wobbled from the shadow of fallen spruce, dark and unsteady as if the ground kept shifting beneath them. Wolf cubs, no bigger than badgers, legs like sticks, bellies pinched tight against rib. One stumbled, the other pressed close and nosed its sibling back up as if a tiny tide were holding the pair together. They should not have been alone. Pups. This small belonged to a den shadowed with fur and the warm press of bodies, to hunters who returned with meat and stories stitched in scent. Yet the wind carried no adult wolf, no musk of pack, no reassurance. Only the faint stink of burned bark from a lightning strike somewhere up the slope and the bitter rind of fear. The grizzly dropped to all fours. Instinct ran down the old trails inside her. Avoid adult wolves. Take back trails when their shadows are long. Keep to river noise when they hunt together. But these were not hunters. They were hunger wrapped in fur. The cubs saw her. The bolder one froze, forepaws braced, ears flattened to skull. The smaller leaned into its sibling and made a sound too tired to be a growl. It was more like breath catching on pain. They did not run. They walked toward her, paws whispering through last year's grass, and when they reached the bare strip of gravel where the stream had receded, they stopped and lifted their faces, throats working. The little voices came out cracked and soft, a plea shaped by need more than language. The bear's jaw hung open to taste their story. Blood, old, not theirs, smoke and wet ash. Coyote, maybe 2 days ago. A long gap where meat should have been. She took a step, and the bolder pup flinched, then crept forward again and pressed its nose to her foot. The other tucked itself low, sides hiccuping with shivers it could not control. Behind them, the valley held its ordinary dangers. Evening coyotes tuned their voices along the ridge, testing the edge of dark. A red tail drew circles over the meadow, patient as a clock. Far off, a single lonely howl lifted and fell, a survivor calling to the unanswering hills. The grizzly lowered her head until her whiskers brushed the pup's ears. She did not know what to do with such smallness. Her life had been made of large choices, force against winter, fish against current, distance against danger. This was a new kind of edge. She nudged the bolder pup. It swayed and set its feet again with the stubborn courage of living things. The smaller pup tried to lick her chin and missed, tongue flicking at empty air before it lay down, too tired to keep pretending the world wasn't heavy. Downstream, the water chewed at its bank, undercutting willow roots. The bear remembered. The ache of milk long dried, the empty circle where her own late-winter cub had once fit beneath her foreleg. That memory came like a thorn, and then like a guide. She moved sideways to make a wall of her body against the wind and lowered herself. Into the grass. The pups inched closer, inch by inch, until their backs pressed against the heat of her ribs. Their tremors softened. Their breaths, at last, found rhythm. The coyote's song shifted key, drawing nearer. The grizzly's ears lifted. She turned. Her head so one eye could hold the meadow while the rest of her held the pups. The dust along the elk path lifted in a thin ribbon, as if feet were coming. She couldn't see figures yet, only the promise of movement where the grass bowed and rose. The bolder pup raised its head, nose quivering. The smaller pressed closer, heart hammering against her skin. The bear drew a long breath and rumbled, low in her chest, a sound that meant stay, that meant I am here, that meant as much to her as to them. Then, from the dimming edge of the willow line, something large broke the grass and moved fast. Too fast for deer, too coordinated for chance. The grizzly gathered her weight under her, every muscle coiling to choose. Stand and fight, or take the pups and run for the river's blind bend. The silhouettes kept coming, and the wind, suddenly, carried more than dust. It brought wolves. The silhouettes crested the ridge and spilled down into the valley like spilled ink across a page. At first, only their outlines moved against the bruised sky, ears tall, bodies low to the ground, pacing in unison. Wolves. The grizzly stiffened, her fur bristling along her shoulders. Her memory carried 1,000 warnings. Wolves were numbers and precision, teeth working as one machine. Alone, she could match them, even scatter them. With 2 fragile bundles pressed against her ribs, she had no advantage. The pups stirred. The bolder one squeaked and tried to rise, tail thumping weakly. The smaller whimpered and buried its face deeper into her fur. She lowered her muzzle, brushing both cubs with her breath, steadying them with a low rumble. The pack drew closer, 7, maybe 8, thin from a harsh spring, ribs visible beneath mottled coats. Hunger sharpened their movements. Their paws sent small clouds of dust up from the valley floor, and their eyes gleamed with a light that was not welcome. The matriarch of the pack, gray-muzzled and scar-worn, halted first. Her nose lifted, sifting the night. She smelled the cubs. Her head tilted, and a low whine pushed through her throat, recognition of her kind, but also of their weakness. She stepped forward, and the rest of the pack fanned out, crescent-shaped, testing the air, testing the bear. The grizzly rose, massive against the grass, a wall of muscle and scar. She roared once, the sound breaking through the valley, rolling back against the pines. The wolves froze. For a breath, even the wind seemed to pause, but hunger is stubborn. The gray muzzle growled, snapping her jaws, and 2 younger wolves crept forward. Their paws made no sound on the gravel, their eyes locked not on the bear, but on the pups pressed into her side. The bolder pup whimpered, ears pinned flat. The bear shifted, moving so her bulk blocked the wolf's line of sight. She bared her teeth, lips curling, saliva bright under the last threads of daylight. Her growl rolled like thunder over stone. The wolves hesitated. Then one lunged. The bear swung her paw in a blur of power. The strike cracked against the wolf's shoulder, sending it tumbling sideways into the dust with a yelp. The pack snarled, their circle tightening, voices braiding into a chilling chorus. The pups cried out, tiny sounds drowned in the storm. The smaller collapsed against the earth, chest heaving, too frightened to move. The bear stood over them, claws carving furrows into the ground, her body an unmovable wall. The gray muzzle's eyes narrowed. She gave a short bark, sharp and commanding. The wolves stilled, circling slower now, calculating. They had seen the bear's strength, but they had also seen the exhaustion in her flanks, the raw edge of her wounds from winters past, minutes stretched thin. Dust carried in the air, glowing faintly as the last of the sun fell behind the ridge. Then the wind shifted. It carried a scent sharp and strange. Man, smoke, leather, the iron tang of tools. The wolves froze, nostrils flaring, their eyes flicked. To the tree line, then back to the bear. The grizzly caught it too. Her ears pricked, muscles taut. Human presence meant danger, but also distraction. The gray muzzle whined once, spun, and led her pack back into the long grass. Their shapes dissolved into shadow until only the silence of the valley remained. The bear exhaled, sides heaving. She lowered her head to the pups. The boulder pressed its nose into her fur. The smaller trembled but leaned into her warmth. Above them, stars sharpened against the black sky. The air cooled, and the valley exhaled the smoke scent of distant fires. The bear lay down again, curling her body protectively around the pups. The danger had passed, for now, but she knew the world would not stop testing them. In the distance, a faint glimmer of firelight flickered through the trees. The humans were closer than she thought. The stars had barely carved their places in the sky when the scent thickened. Smoke, wood char, and the metallic tang of tools. The grizzly shifted uneasily, her massive frame rising from the ground. The pups whimpered at the sudden movement, their tiny bodies pressing tighter against her flank. Through the darkness, a flicker pulsed. Firelight. It glowed through the trunks of the pines, faint but undeniable. With every gust of wind, the smell grew stronger. Humans. The grizzlies. Ears twitched. She remembered men from past seasons, their dogs, their steel, their noise. The memory of shouting and the sting of gunpowder lived deep in her bones. Normally she would vanish, slipping back into the wilderness where no scent of fire could reach her. But now she glanced down at the wolf pups. Too small, too weak. They could not follow her into deep forest, not at the pace survival demanded. The bold pup stood shakily, its tiny legs wobbling, curiosity outweighing fear. Its ears tilted toward the faint crackle of fire as though recognizing something unknown, but important. The smaller pup remained collapsed, sides heaving, exhaustion claiming more than courage could supply. The bear moved closer to the ground, pressing her belly against the cool earth. Slowly, she guided the pups into the shelter of a fallen log, nudging them with her muzzle until their small shapes disappeared in the hollow. She rumbled low, a sound meant to soothe but also to command. Stay. Then she turned toward the light. From the edge of the clearing, she could see them. 3 humans gathered near a fire, their voices murmuring low, blending with the night wind. One lifted a flask, another poked the flames with a stick, sparks spiraling into the black sky. Behind them leaned tools, packs, a rifle glinting faintly in the glow, and something else. Meat hanging from a branch, fresh kill meant for their dinner. The bear's nostrils flared. The scent of blood and fat rolled across the air like a wave, making the emptiness in her stomach ache. She growled softly, not from hunger alone, but from memory. These men had taken what the land gave freely, carving more than they needed. Her kind had learned to fear them, to slip away unseen. But the pups, they had no such knowledge. The wind shifted again. A tiny whine carried from the log. The boulder. Pup had crawled halfway out, nose testing the air, ears pricked toward the firelight. The grizzly turned sharply and hurried back, nudging the cub into the hollow again. Its little legs resisted, paws scraping at the bark, but she pushed firmly until it curled once more against its sibling. The humans laughed then. Sudden, loud. One threw something into the flames, and the crack echoed through the valley like a gunshot. The pups whimpered, and the bear stiffened, claws digging into the dirt. She moved her body over the log, shielding them from view, her breath loud in the silence. Minutes dragged. The men's voices ebbed and flowed, their fire popping and spitting sparks. None of them turned toward the dark meadow where the bear waited, her form swallowed by shadow. Slowly, their talk grew quieter. One lay back against a pack, another stretched near the flames, eyes heavy. The third fed the fire one last branch before settling. The grizzly remained motionless, her muscles aching with stillness. Only when their breathing steadied into the rhythm of sleep did she shift. She bent her head to the pups. Their small bodies trembled, but their eyes glowed faintly in the starlight, fixed on her. She rumbled deep in her chest, an oath now as solid as the mountains. I will not leave you. Above, the smoke rose into the sky, blotting out a few stars. The valley held its silence, but tension clung to every shadow. The wolves were gone. The serpent threat of men remained, and dawn was still far away. The night stretched on, and with it the weight of silence. The firelight flickered against the trees, throwing orange ribbons across the bark. The grizzly held her ground near the fallen log, her massive body pressed low to shield the wolf pups. Each sound from the human camp, every crack of wood, every shift of boots, echoed in her ears like danger ready to leap. The pups clung to her warmth. The bolder one lifted its head now and then, curiosity glowing in its eyes, while the smaller trembled continuously, chest fluttering with shallow breaths. They had no den, no parents to return to, only the great wall of fur that kept them safe. For now, the bear's muscles ached, but she did not move. She scanned the darkness, listening. The wolves were gone, but the valley never slept. Somewhere beyond the ridge, a mountain lion screamed, shrill and ragged. Coyotes answered in chorus, their laughter prickling along the bear's spine. Predators everywhere, circling invisible lines of survival. The humans stirred again. One rose and left the circle of firelight, stepping into the shadows with a rifle slung loosely in his hands. His boots cracked twigs as he walked the edge of the meadow, scanning the dark. The grizzly froze, every muscle taut. She pressed her body harder against the log, lowering her head until her nose nearly touched the pups. The bold one whimpered. The small one burrowed deeper, and she answered with a low rumble. Silent now. The man walked closer, his eyes sweeping across the valley. He paused near the stream where the moonlight shimmered on the water, then crouched, inspecting the tracks. Pressed into the mud, bare tracks. Fresh. His voice called back to the camp, sharp, carrying, "We've got company." The other men stirred, reaching for their rifles. Boots scuffed, metal clicked. The air shifted, full of danger. The bear rose slowly to her feet, towering over the log. Her breath came in heavy clouds, her ears pinned back. She did not want this fight, but she would not leave the pups. The bold cub gave a small, broken howl, too soft to travel far, but enough to echo in her bones. She nudged him sharply back down, but it was too late. The man by the stream turned his head. His eyes narrowed. At the sound, he raised his rifle. The grizzly roared. The sound thundered through the valley, bouncing off the ridges, rattling the trees. The men staggered, startled by the sudden eruption of power. Birds burst from the canopy, wings beating the air like drums. The pups pressed into the dirt, eyes wide. The man fired. The crack of the shot split the night, echoing endlessly. Bark exploded from a pine trunk near the bear, shards raining down. The wolves' scent had been danger. This was death made fire. The bear surged forward, roaring again, her claws tearing the earth. She did not attack, but her size, her fury, Her sound filled the night with something primal and unstoppable. The men shouted, stumbling back toward their fire, rifles raised but hands shaking. The Grizzly stopped just short of the light. Her teeth gleamed in the fire's glow, her chest heaving. Behind her the pups whined softly, alive but trembling. She turned her head, making sure they stayed low, hidden by shadow. For a long moment, predator and man stood locked in a fragile balance. Neither moved closer, neither gave ground. Finally, one of the men lowered his rifle, muttering under his breath. Another followed. Only the first kept his weapon raised, eyes flicking from bear to fire to darkness. The standoff stretched until the fire popped, sparks rising into the black sky. The bear exhaled, a deep rumble rolling from her chest. She stepped backward, one heavy paw after another, never turning her back until the darkness swallowed her again. The men muttered nervously, reloading, their firelight shrinking smaller. With each step she took away. Back at the log, the pups scrambled against her legs, clinging, alive. She lowered herself once more, curling her massive frame around them. The humans were not gone. But tonight, she had chosen survival over war. The night thinned slowly, shadows melting as the horizon began to blush with pale light. A thin ribbon of gold stretched across the ridgeline, promising morning, though the valley still held the weight of darkness. The Grizzly had not slept. Her body ached with every breath, her paws sore from pacing the ground between the pups and the direction of the human fire. She stayed alert, ears flicking at every crack of twig, every distant coyote call. The pups, pressed against her side, had drifted into shallow sleep, their ribs rising and falling unevenly. When the first warmth of sun touched her fur, she shifted. The smaller pup stirred and whimpered, too weak to stand. The bolder one lifted, its head, ears pricked, its eyes catching the first spark of morning. The cub nosed her shoulder as if urging her to move. The bear rumbled low. She understood. They needed distance. Cautiously she rose, shaking dust and dew from her coat. She nudged the pups forward, guiding them from the hollow log. Their paws sank into cold grass wet with dawn. The bold pup trotted a few paces, nose twitching toward the stream. The smaller followed, stumbling. The bear led them away from the fading glow of the fire, deeper into the shadow of the trees. Every few steps she paused, turning her head back. The men had not moved yet. Their camp was quiet, smoke rising weakly into the air. But she knew they would not linger forever. Hunters always followed tracks. The trio reached the stream. The water was shallow, flowing quick over pebbles that glistened in the light. The bold pup stepped in first, yelping at the shock of cold before lapping clumsily at the surface. The smaller pup crouched at the bank, lapping only when nudged by the bear's nose. She drank, too, the water cooling her throat, though she never let her eyes leave the woods. When the pups had drunk their fill, she guided them across. The bold one managed, splashing noisily, tail twitching. The smaller slipped once, caught in the current, but the bear's paw swept him gently back to the bank. She lifted him by the scruff, carrying him across as his legs dangled before setting, him safely on the far side. The forest there was thicker. Pine trunks grew close and the ground was soft with needles. Shafts of sunlight broke through in narrow beams, lighting dust motes that floated in the stillness. Here, the scents changed. Less human, more earth. Rabbits, elk, even the faint musk of fox. The pups followed clumsily, paws catching on roots. The bold one barked once, high-pitched and awkward, startling its sibling. The smaller froze, crouching, eyes darting. The bear gave a low chuff, calming them both. For a short while, peace returned. Birds called overhead, squirrels scolded from branches. The pups tottered beside her, leaning against her legs when tired, resting when she stopped. She carried no den to give them, but she gave them her body, her watchfulness, her promise. Yet peace was fragile. From deep in the forest came another sound, a howl, not far, not faint. A wolf's voice, sharp and searching. The pups froze. There, ears pricked, their eyes wide. The bolder one barked back instinctively, voice breaking halfway. The smaller whimpered, pressing into the bear's paw. The grizzly stiffened. This was not the hunger scent of lone coyotes, nor the strange smoke of men. This was closer, familiar to the pups, but dangerous all the same. A wolf, calling, maybe searching for its lost pack, or maybe hunting. The bear lowered her head, hurry, growl, deep and steady. She pushed the pups behind her and turned toward the sound. The dawn was young, and already another trial waited. The howl came again, louder now, echoing between the trees. It was not the long, mournful cry of a lone wolf. It was sharper, pulsing with intent. A signal, a call answered. From deeper in the forest, more voices rose. One, then two, then many. The air itself seemed to tremble under the chorus. The wolf pups shivered violently. The bold one whined and looked toward the sound, torn between recognition and terror. The smaller pup pressed so tightly into the bear's leg that his tiny claws hooked in her fur. The grizzly shifted her weight, positioning herself between the pups and the direction of the calls. Her ears flicked, nose twitching. The wolves were moving closer. She could smell them now. Wet fur, musk, hunger. They had picked up her trail, the trail of two lost pups clinging to an animal that was never meant to be their guardian. Through the dense pines, shapes appeared. Dark silhouettes gliding silently, paws patting with a precision that spoke of experience. A dozen wolves, maybe more, eyes glinting in the shafts of sunlight that pierced the canopy. They spread in a wide arc, cutting off paths of escape. The bear rumbled deep in her chest. Her claws dug into the soft earth, her massive shoulders rolling forward. She towered, lips curling to reveal teeth stained with age and survival. The pack slowed, their growls rippling like wind through tall grass. The leader stepped forward, a lean, black wolf with silver scars across his muzzle. His eyes locked onto the bear, but then flicked to the pups behind her. His ears twitched, tail stiff, a signal to the others. The bold pup yelped. Its tiny bark carried through the air like a crack. The wolves froze. For a heartbeat, the pack faltered. Recognition flickered in their eyes. These were their own. Lost blood, found again. But the pause was short. Hunger spoke louder than kinship. The wolves surged closer, their teeth bared. The grizzly roared. The sound split the air, scattering birds from the treetops. She lunged forward, swiping with a paw the size of a man's head. One wolf darted too close. Her strike sent it tumbling into the underbrush with a yelp. Another tried to circle behind her, but she spun, snapping her jaws so close that teeth clicked like breaking bone. The pups squealed, their voices piercing the chaos. The smaller collapsed in fear. The bold one crouched low, trembling but staring, wide-eyed at the pack. The wolves regrouped, circling tighter. Their leader snarled, his hackles raised, tail stiff as a spear. This was not retreat. This was strategy. They knew the bear was strong, but they also knew exhaustion lived in her. Bones. The bear's chest heaved. Her sides burned with every breath, but she stood her ground. She could not run. She could not fight forever. The pups pressed into her legs, their hearts hammering, their small bodies warm against her fur. Then something unexpected happened. The bold pup barked again, shrill, broken, but insistent. It stumbled forward a step, tail low, voice cracking. The sound was desperate, but it was also defiant. It rang out across the clearing, pulling every wolf's gaze. The leader paused. His ears flicked. His head tilted slightly as if torn between instinct and recognition. The bold pup barked again, weaker now but refusing to fall silent. The bear lowered her head, her growl deepening. She pressed her paw against the pup's back, nudging him close again. The pack waited, uncertain, the moment stretching taut, like wire. The forest held its breath. Would blood decide this moment, or would hunger? The grizzly's roar answered first, shaking the earth beneath her paws. And the wolves lunged. The wolves surged forward like shadows tearing loose from the trees. Their paws thudded against the earth, teeth flashing in the morning sun. The pack's snarls blended into a single, bone-chilling sound. The grizzly met them head-on. She roared, the ground vibrating under her fury, and swung her paw with a force that split the air. One wolf was struck broadside, sent sprawling into the grass. Another snapped at her flank but met teeth and was forced back, yelping. But for every wolf she pushed away, another closed in. They circled, darting in, testing her defenses. The bear's muscles burned, her breath ragged. Yet she stood like a mountain refusing to break. Behind her, the two pups cowered against the ground, tiny bodies shaking, whimpers piercing through the chaos. The black leader darted forward, eyes locked on the bold pup. In that instant, the grizzly spun and blocked his path, her body slamming into his with the weight of stone. He tumbled back, stunned but unbroken, his growl rising like a challenge. The pups cried louder. The bolder one staggered to its paws, barking wildly, voice breaking. The smaller whimpered, pressing into its sibling, both too weak to fight but refusing to leave her side. Their tiny sounds cut through the fury, a desperate plea that hung over the battle. The wolves faltered. Some slowed, ears flicking toward. The pups. Recognition tugged at them. Blood knew blood. The leader froze for a heartbeat, his eyes narrowing, tail rigid. His ears tilted, hearing in those cries the faint echo of kin he thought lost. The grizzly seized the moment. She rose to her full height, towering, chest heaving, teeth bared in a roar that shook the clearing. Dust lifted from the ground, sunlight flashing across her scarred body. She wasn't just fighting for herself, she was declaring, "They are mine now." The wolves pulled back a step. Their growls wavered into silence.